coming to the presentation, what should I present? I mean, that is the challenges when you say about Indian education, its development. It's a very mammoth type of a thing. You know, it is. To limit that into about 25 minutes presentation here is something which is, I don't know how one can really do. So I thought that I should focus on certain areas only, and then give something like a bird's eye view of 75 years of Indian education. Which would say that I may not be able to go to many of the micro aspects of the pre-independence time. Of course, that I am not focusing at all. My most focus would be post independence, but nevertheless, I will have to focus on something in the post independence. And I thought there are 4 areas that I can take as focus, which are broad challenges which India faced at the time of independence. One is access to education. Access. How many people are participating in education, including literacy, and then of course primary education and participation in higher education, etc. At that time, and inclusion of all in the society. You see, that is another important thing. It is not that, and most of them probably at that time was coming from the more advantaged communities in many ways. And then, of course, the quality. Access alone is not enough. Quality of educational provision that we are giving in different sectors. And what is the relevance of that? Relevance of the education that the people are getting. So these are the 4 things broadly I am going to focus on. And of course, there will be other aspects also coming in within the discussion of this. Now, going into the pre-independence, I think we should also remember the ancient and medieval education, not only in India, globally, if you look at, has been religious education, has been very elitist education, and education was really not for the masses to that extent, and I have no intention to go into the details of that. And this is not the case in India alone. Indian, Chinese, European educational institutions in both the ancient as well as medieval period shows that it is mostly for a few people. I mean, not a very large number that education was given. And then, of course, focus has been in Indian education to other aspects of life, also health, and all these was taken care of, and all these. So I don't want to go into that, but all that influence still has to be there, and then we have to see how that would have influenced us later. Now, modern period, if you look at it, is globally, it is modern is seen as the post-industrial revolution time, and post-industrial revolution time, till that time it was mostly for the elitist education, but industrial revolution really had an impact on the education, in the sense that there are others also who would have to be trained, educated to be a good workforce in the society. And that idea of education for all, in one, not in the same words, but came up during that time in Europe. And but India, being with the British, being a British colony at that time, that did not have that impact to that extent in India, because as Professor Tikam was mentioning initially, that we were governed by the Macaulay's minutes, which actually said, which was something like a vision or mission or whatever that the British had, a class of persons who are Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, morals, and intellect, who would always cooperate with the British rules. You see, it clearly says what would have been the focus of the Britishers as far as Indian education is concerned. And according to that vision, the Britishers was to create a class of literate people, not all, but a class, a group of literate people, which would help them in administration, in keeping the mind, and that also, that is a limited objective that that they had. They did not pay any attention for the spread of education and literacy in India. You see, that is a British period by the British. But that doesn't mean that during the British period there were there were no other developments. Other developments, the local efforts have been there, like the Indian freedom movement had an impact on how education has to be looked at in our own society. So we have examples of institutions, universities, all being set up. We know about the BHU and AMU and so many other educational institutions coming up. Even at the school level, good institutions came up because of the efforts made by the Indians and the Indian leaders and social leaders in this during that time. And the princely states also, I have to mention, sitting in Kerala and studying long back in Baroda, I cannot miss that. Efforts of princely states, free and compulsory primary education in Travancore and Baroda states came up during the First World War time. See, that sort of a long vision they had, and I remember well in Travancore. I know my mother used to say many a time that if you don't go to school, you will be taxed also. You will have to pay if your child is not going into, that sort of a in the state of Travancore. And so that was the type of efforts that happened. But I'm not going into those details, and because I'm focusing on the challenges in the post independence. But I had to see what was the situation. I think it is important to look at the situation at the time of independence. At the time of independence, the literacy was only about 18%, about 19%, and male literacy was about 27%, and female less than 10%. It's 9%. That was the literacy. So you don't have to talk about what would be the primary education enrollment. Without literacy, they would not have been. And so many of them entered the school but did not learn anything, and they dropped out. And the dropout rate was very high at that time. The teacher-student ratio was also large, in the sense 1:34 teachers, and women participation in the teaching community was 15%. Today, I think we have a much larger. We have women in educational teaching is very large, and one primary school for 13 square kilometers. Today, we know that every 1 kilometer there is a primary school in most parts. Main emphasis on general education and no focus on technical vocational education, ignored. And Indian language and culture was neglected, and its medium was English, and neglect of the weaker sections of the society. This was the state of the affairs at that time, at the time of independence. Now, in as far as professional technical education is concerned, in 1951, statistics says that there were only 28 medical colleges and 4 dental colleges in the entire country. There are 4,500 seats available in engineering technology institutions. There are 33 engineering colleges altogether. Professional and vocational educations like management, architecture, agriculture were completely neglected. So that was the situation when we entered, and then the post-independence period. If you look at the task, we can easily see the task was very mammoth. Even to access inclusion of all the society, irrespective of gender, caste, religion, quality of teachers, very less trained teachers at that time, and curriculum, what sort of curriculum, the relevance of curriculum to life and work, all these were to be the focus. I think as all of us would see, that immediate thing that the government did at that time was to the constitution was formulated, and it was 1950, and at that time, according to the constitution, if you look at the provisions, the original constitutional provisions in education, as well as what was amendments that happened later, the directive principles had this free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. All of us know. I mean, this we have been talking about, and then we have been keeping that as our light, and to reach that, and and the reason was that for social justice and democracy, but also for improving average worker competence and increasing national productivity. This was considered to be very important to have the compulsory education, especially up to 14 years. But that did not work to that extent. Our experience later says, I'm not going in a chronological manner here, but I want to bring in that it became a strength. It became a strong, what can I say, that objective when it became when the 42nd Amendment that happened in no, I'm sorry, that 42nd Amendment was to the education as a state subject. That was in 1976, but till that time the Constitution said that it will be a state subject, and it was moved to the concurrent list of the Constitution in 1976. Whether what has really that given, we will have some discussion towards the end of my talk. To what extent it helped, to what extent it came in the way, but that now it is in the concurrent list. Now, for the universal primary education, the Right to Education Act of 2002, this article was inserted 21A into the Indian Constitution, declaring right to education as a fundamental right, and that makes it make things different. Today, for example, a child can really demand that he or she should be provided that education within the primary education school, primary school within the jurisdiction of, or within the geographical area of within 1 kilometer. So that was a real legal right that people got. Now, in the Constitution, there were other aspects also against the discrimination that has been happening in the society. So there are several articles. I don't want to go into those details, but it is for it prohibits discrimination against any citizen on the basis of gender, religion, race, or place of birth. It empowers the state to create specific provisions for women, including education. So it is not only in educational provisions, but other areas also. And according to the Article 15.1, again, according to this article, the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on the basis of gender, religion, race, or place of birth. It was very important to have those constitutional provisions. And then, of course, with regard to the constitutional provisions for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, that also we know that, and the weaker sections of the community, the reservations that was made. So all these provisions have been there, and with that equipment, the legal equipment, the government went into the expansion of education. And if you really look at from 1947 till today, it has been incredible. I mean, it's not that we are to undermine the development that has happened at different stages. For a country like India, which is so large and the largest democracy, if it was a autocracy like China, that would have been a different situation. But a democracy, to achieve some of these things through a democratic process, is not that simple. And and we have the federal system, the union government and the state government, similar to, for example, US or Canada, and they also have different responsibilities. In US, for example, it is more with the states, of the education is more or less entirely with the states. In Canada also, the residual part only goes to the central government, the federal government there. So both the center and the state governments did show great concern after the independence time, during the post-independence time, early days, on improvements in education. make it accessible across all sections of the society from elite to masses. And revamp the whole education system was considered most important at that time. If you what we remember in the first 20-25 years of independence, one commission after other were formulated. We have this Radhakrishnan Commission for Higher Education. Then we have the Mudaliar Commission for secondary education, and then Kothari Education Commission report, probably one of the best drafted education report, not only in India but anywhere in the world. So comprehensive to be done during 64-66. Report was, even today, if you go back and start looking at that, many of the things we are trying to achieve today was mentioned at that time in the Kothari Commission report. Although, for example, IGNOU came into existence only in 1985, but Kothari Commission had mentioned about correspondence education and what it should be really. So you can really see in many of these areas, it is talking about even technology, not the type of technology we are talking about now, but the ICT integration and such things. And after this, there were several policy formulations happened, as also we know. The draft policy, national policy emerging from Kothari Commission in 1968. This did not become a policy, but it was only a draft. Then the challenge of education, a policy perspective in 1985. Then NPE, National Policy of Education, 1986, which we talked about quite a lot till the recent policy came into existence, National Education Policy 2020. And in between also, after 1986 policy, there was a modified version in 1992 and a program of action. All these were trying to, changes happened without that. Although 1986 IGNOU's creation was in a way included in the 1986 policy, but IGNOU came into existence 1 year before, 1985. So look at that, was a very, what can I say, that a very main landmark in the higher education system in the country is the open education, open universities in India, and how it increased the access. Now, in terms of other initiatives, if you look at, there are other institutions were set up after independence. TIFR, for example, was already there in 1945, set up by Tatas, but then that was strengthened further, and then government almost took it over, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Then the UGC, which was a committee, grants committee, became the University Grants Commission. And the NCRT is setting up in 1961 for school education. And another important and very important to focus here is that the agriculture land grant universities that came up during the late 50s and early 60s. And that was the first time that an agriculture university was being set up in any country. And imagine that agriculture universities and the agriculture research that went into that, and made a big difference in the I mean, we were depending on outside for food at that time. We were not self-sufficient for food. So I was talking about the agriculture universities, and that was a major landmark. I mean, agriculture universities, and if you look at the agriculture research, which led to the Green Revolution, and also the impact that it had in also in other areas, in the milk revolution that came up from Gujarat. All these are to be, and also science and technology education. The IITs came up in the 50s and 60s, and today we have expanded that. We have gone for more IITs. Space research, we have Mangalayan of today, but space research, which was mooted in the 50s, I think that's very important to see. And then the Baba Atomic Research Center, which went into the development of atomic energy applications. So there were initiatives of this sort. But now, leaving that, let me focus more on now the basic sort of thing, access and etc. And see, for access, basically, what the country has been trying to do is universal literacy has to be brought in. University primary education, universal primary education, reaching out to all sections. Then, of course, higher education, democratizing higher education, vocationalizing education was another focus which was there. Improving teacher quality. Being from teacher education, I mean, we can have another long presentation on that. But then, teacher quality was an area which was looked at, and improving school participation, school infrastructure. All these were there, and you remember, you have to see this in the light of the amendment that happened, the 45th amendment of being in the concurrent list. Centers started putting more money into the development. I mean, we remember those days of DPEP, which then later went into Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and then Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan for secondary education, then the Ucha Shiksha Abhiyan later, and all these have been there. And all these were the center's intervention in improving, because it was probably seen at that time that many states are not putting money enough into education, because the money was being given to the school, the states. Some of the states put all the money into, especially by primary education. So you'll find some states today are better developed in the area of school education than others. One main reason is that their allocation of money for different levels have been different. And then, of course, the increasing community participation is another thing which happened during, we tried during the district primary education project time, DPEP, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Interestingly, there was much more community participation before independence. I mean, I remember that going to some schools in Gujarat, there were in the villages, there were schools which were supported by the village. They will go and ask what's happening to the school. I mean, if the teachers don't come and all. But that got reduced because of government intervention in the school, because it was all, teachers were earlier reporting to the community, teachers started reporting to the government. So they thought, why should we report to the community? The government has to be. We have to send it to the inspector schools. So that actually brought down the community participation to a great extent during the 50s, 60s. Now this was to be brought back. So the community participation with the community village committee, education committee, and such things were that came up during the 80s, for example, 90s, 80s and 90s, and then. There was a Central Advisory Board of Education which was created. Today, of course, it is defunct. It is not there. The NCRT, on its own way, created the RIEs, SCRTs, and supported the SCRTs, the diets, which is a very important district institute for education and training. Diets were also a centrally sponsored scheme because of the central intervention and putting money into the scheme. And then, of course, we all know about the Navodaya schools, Vidyalayas, which are going on, quality schools, one in every district in the country. And teacher education is still going through a difficult time. Even today, that's very, very sad to say that, because we started with the license to teaching LT to Bachelor of Teaching BT to BEd, 1 year, 2 years. Then the 4-year integrated program, which in the 60s RIE tried out, but finally the government decided, no, we should all have 4-year integrated program, and the efforts are being made. Hopefully that will improve the teacher development, at least the preschool, pre-service teaching, now teacher training, but in-service teacher training has to be properly connected and integrated with that, so that should only improve the quality of teaching. Now, open education and technology integration, I think I should mention that area, because it is connected with access quite a bit, and also connected with quality improvement. Democratizing higher education, the open universities came up, open schools came up, and then of course later the whole technology integration in the form of the online courses, digitization, digital learning, resource repositories. Today we have Swayam for higher education. We have IGNOU has its own repository, NCRT has its own repository, and So there is a lot of materials now available. Maybe all of them are not with restrictions. I mean, with copyright relaxations, OER. They may not be OER. Some of them are. So there's a need probably to make that happen. And of course, other centrally sponsored schemes came up later, like I told you about the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, then Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA. And the latest, interestingly, whenever we talked about teacher education earlier, we were only thinking about schools. Even NCTE, which was set up, very clearly said that we are only concerned with school teachers. And that too, not that I did not mention at all, I should have earlier, not only government and government aided schools. How the private schools are going on, we still have no great idea about it. So that's a very sad situation in a way, because a lot of our children are going into private schools. They are not being, yes, the syllabus, the curriculum, and all these, the CBSE and all curriculum is there, but otherwise the control is quite limited there. For higher education teachers, the Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission is a good scheme that has now all the schools of education that came up in all the central universities are focusing on higher education teachers. And then, so if you look at the achievements, I think I will finish in 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm a little delayed. In 5 minutes time, the great quantitative expansion at all levels of education, I think we can really claim that as an achievement. There has been expansion. I don't know how many universities, 600, 700, 800, I missed the number, but there are several universities. Privatization is happening. There is private universities, at least with state legislation. Centralization, no, it has not been. But quality of some of them are good, some of them are not good. Quality is still an issue with NAC and all these being there also. Quality is another issue which we have to really look into. And availability of primary school within a kilometer. Average primary school enrollment has gone up. Gross enrollment average between 1971 to 2019 is 94%. And 2015, the gross enrollment ratio was 74% for secondary education. And the gross enrollment ratio in higher education is, this may be a wrong figure, you may be able to correct, 27 or 28%. But I am not very sure whether they are all in the age-specific population. The age-specific means we are talking about 18 to 23, 25. I think if my information is right, the IGNOU enrollment also goes into the higher education because they are in higher education. So we cannot really say that is age-specific population. There have been quality assurance agencies which have been doing some good job. Indian Medical Council, Indian Nursing Council, AICTE, which of course is now not, AICTE is continuing, or I don't know, about 2020. NCT is continuing. NAC, of course, is doing a good job. I think NAC is, I can see the colleges improvement is happening. I can see in Cochin, in fact, the colleges, how they are really looking for NAC assessment and accreditation. And achievements, if you look at increased trained teachers in schools, yes, but still we have untrained teachers in the government schools. In number, I cannot say here. There may be statistics available. And I know very well that there are private schools which take teachers without training and supposed to be good private schools. Textbooks for all children, NCERT sort of came out with some sort of a model for the whole country, and then states were given the freedom to change according to their local needs, because school education has to be according to the local needs, even to the district needs. That's why the district primary education projects focus on district-centered even curricular changes district-wise. Now, quality improvement in government schools has happened really. I can give two examples. One, I have been living now for last 3-4 years here in Kerala. In the last 2 years, especially during the COVID time, many students from the private schools have gone into government schools. Earlier, it was different. In fact, the Cochin Regional Center here is on the ground of a school which was closed down in Cochin. That was at that time. Now they are expanding the enrollment in schools. So this actually says, and they really saw that the government schools and the Victor television programs going to the children from the state headquarters in Thiruvananthapuram, along with the local support, online support given by the school, made the government schools better than some of the private schools. I'm not talking all private schools. Some very good private schools are there. So some of the from bad private schools, people have moved to government schools. That's a very good, information. And the similar thing I understand happened in Delhi government schools. Delhi government schools, the result has also gone up. And I'm told, I don't really know, people can correct me if I'm wrong, that many of the Delhi public schools have also improved their infrastructure. And technology integration in school, many schools have happened, not only in private schools, not only in so-called good private schools. But still we have issues faced, and I'll just flag those issues and conclude this. Curriculum and instruction, decentralized versus centralized. This is a broader issue of center-state relationship, center-state responsibility. In concurrent list, what should be the come from center and what should the state do? I think this is an issue we are still. Only recently we had this information, like the schools, the curriculum of school curriculum will be collected from different states, and that center will make a national curriculum, and then that national curriculum has to be followed by all schools in the country. That will only make the curriculum uniform rather than providing the flexibility. That's my personal view. So if any particular day, if you want to know which subject is being taught in any school in India, you should be able to say that. Maybe that's a good thing to say as a centralized activity. Similarly, all these technology integration thing also, online courses and are mainly, we are looking at online courses being offered directly to the institutions. We are not highlighting the importance of social media for improving community networking and learning from within the learning community. I mean, I know there are issues in social media, which of course we have to be careful about, but then that has a potential in bringing children together in a class within a WhatsApp group or whatever. And the teacher autonomy is still, teachers' autonomy is being reduced than being improved. So that's the sort of, these are some of the issues that is coming. Financing, I think that I stop with, and learning performance. Learning performance is still an issue. Let me first talk about learning performance. There is an ASER 2018 report I got from the Google that in grade 5, after more than 4 years of schooling, only, this is 2018 report, by the way, only half of all children could read a grade 2 level text fluently. The National Achievement Survey 2017, which was conducted for grades 3, 5, and 8, gave a similar picture, with only 45.2% of students achieving the targeted performance levels across all subjects and classes at the national level. This I have quoted from my Google. And last is, so performance is an issue. We are really not knowing the outcomes are being achieved, the learning outcomes. And financing, if you look at financing, last year's, that is 2019-20, financing was, it is reported by the government, is 3.1% of the GDP. Financing is a major issue. Now, from where this money should come? Should it come from the government? We have been always trying to say that at least primary education, it is the responsibility of the government according to Constitution. At the age of 14, with the right to education and all, that should be entirely funded by government. We have several primary schools which are private, and we really don't know what's happening in those schools because that's not in the part of statistics. So, but government is now doing a good thing by suggesting 2020 policy I did not bring in because it is just 1 year that the policy is in place. there is a several strategies being worked out. My general feeling about the policy is that it should be made more participative in terms of the states. I mean, sitting in Kerala, of course, Kerala is a difficult state for the government. So I cannot actually say this, but we always feel that there are different things that the states may like to do. Gujarat, I have been talking about. Gujarat has some very good examples because I lived there. I stayed. I think that sort of a freedom should go into that, and then so centralizing everything is not a good idea. Having only Swayam as a repository for the whole country and everything, all the materials should go to Swayam or the IGNOU repository is not a good idea. Let people have their own repositories. Every university should have their own repository. They have to create the materials. I'm not telling that Swayam quality is bad or good or anything. I really don't know much about it. But then everybody should be encouraged. That's about open educational resources. It should come from all over the world. And why only in India? I mean, materials may come from all over. So all these things are my general opinion about it, but then I wouldn't talk about that much. And then I will try to conclude this by telling that we are still to achieve with regard to quality. Access, I think we will achieve. We will, because there is a legal requirement that right to education. So court will have to bring, court will come and tell that you have to do that. How teacher education improved? The Supreme Court came and told that you cannot go on doing this. I mean, you have to do something differently. And maybe the Supreme Court will come and tell about primary education, about right to education. But quality, how are you going to assess the quality? The quality is an issue. Relevance is an issue. Whether general education or education is relevant to the life, all these are issues. So still issues are there. But then, as I said in the beginning, we are a large country. We are quite complex. We are a democratic country, so we are probably surely going in the right direction. But whether we would have achieved, should have achieved more in 75 years is a $1 million question. I don't know what answer one should give, but that is for us all to think about. Let me again thank you, all of you. Basically, it was not just a question of my presenting this. I went through some of these things. I tried to, in education, history of education was not my specialization. Mine was educational technology always. But then it helped me to go back to the earlier days. I might not have covered everything. And thank you so much.